Good morning, Talking Law with Eugenia, brought to you by Adelaide Hills Toyota, a proud Lofty sponsor. Today we're going to be talking to you about buying a motor vehicle, the law, and all the things you need to know about buying a car. And that's actually appropriate because Adelaide Hills Toyota is our sponsor, so I'm going to plug them quite a bit, but you all know I have Toyotas and I've bought all my cars from there, and I don't buy cars from people who aren't reputable. We were going to have two guests on the show, Miles Harper of Harper Davison, but he's ill. So it's only Henry James of Henry James Legal and myself today. Welcome, Henry.
Hi, Eugenia.
Okay, and his number, if you want to get in touch with him, is 0414 414 520. I am taking questions if you want to text them. I've had a few. 0401 269 091. We're starting off with a song. It's being rehashed at the moment, but I'm sure you'll work it out. Enjoy it. Okay, that was Tracy Chapman, Fast Car. Talking Law with Eugenia. My special guest is Henry James of Henry James Legal, 0414 414 520. Welcome again, Henry.
Thank you, Eugenia. It's a topic that's close to my heart, being all about cars.
He's a guru when it comes to cars. I'm going to be asking you, I'm sorry to be sexist or anything, but the chick questions, because I really don't know that much about cars. I rely on my husband for everything I know and don't know about cars. But I do know something about the law as relates to the purchase of anything. We have consumer law in this country, and it sets out consumer guarantees that apply to new and to used vehicles. A supply guarantees, well, they guarantee that the goods will be of acceptable quality, that they will be fit for purpose, and if there are any defects, they will be disclosed before sale, that the goods will match their description. So if you're buying a Holden, you're not getting a Ford. If you're buying a Ford, it's not going to have a Holden engine in it unless it's allowable. That the goods will match the sample with a demonstration model, that they will honour any express guarantees, that you will have title to your goods, you will have undisturbed possession of the goods, and also that there are no undisclosed security on the goods. And my understanding is that there isn't a finance company involved. The manufacturer of the car, that would be your Holden, Merc, BMW, whatever, they guarantee also that the goods will be of acceptable quality, that they will match their description, they will honour any express warranties, and that they will make available repair facilities or spare parts for a reasonable time. And now the discussion is going to go over to Henry, who's going to take you through new and used cars and everything else cars. Over to you.
Thank you, Eugenia. So yes, there's really two types of cars that get sold out there in the community. First, new cars, and then you've got second-hand vehicles. New cars, you're dealing almost exclusively with dealerships who, as Eugenia has just outlined, are bound by various elements of the Australian consumer law. They do have to provide that their cars will be of merchantable quality and fit for purpose, meaning that when you buy a car, you shouldn't be sold a lemon. That car should be reliable, and there's a minimum statutory warranty of 2 years on any good that's sold in this country, let alone motor vehicles. But you'll find that your manufacturer will also provide you with a manufacturer's warranty that's normally of at least 2 years length. It has to be minimum 2 years, but some manufacturers are 3 years, some are 5 years, and some are as many as 10-year warranty products. What I would say about that is, like anything else that I talk about where there's a written contract or a written agreement, a warranty is it's a type of contract. So if you are going to be purchasing a vehicle, read the warranty documentation and work out that that warranty does cover you for what you think it covers you for. If you are worried about purchasing a vehicle, and some of these vehicles can be very expensive. So if you do have your concerns about what is and what isn't covered, always don't be afraid to ask to see the warranty. At a bare minimum, you have the protection of the Australian consumer law. But if you want to know what your warranty covers, you should always read that document. And that's more important than ever when you're looking at extended warranty packages where the manufacturer or the dealer will say, look, you get 3 years manufacturer's warranty, but if you want to continue on with the warranty, you can purchase an aftermarket product provided by a third party that gives you an extended warranty. Although what I'd say about that is you need to read that document very carefully because some of them aren't worth the paper they're written on. The other thing I would raise about those issues as well is that you need to, like any other commercial transaction, really feel that you're comfortable with the decision, because a lot of dealers will have cooling off period that they'll try and encourage you to waive. So you really want to make sure that what you're looking at is something that you want to purchase, that you've read all the documentation. Now, Eugenia does touch on an element of the Australian consumer law, which is that the product you purchase needs to be equivalent to the demonstration product. There's nothing worse than taking a vehicle for a test drive that seems perfect, and then the one that arrives is in fact nowhere near as good as the one that you tried. So you need to be aware that you do have some consumer rights there, and don't be afraid to exercise them if you need to.
That's right. So you're spending a lot of money. It's a big purchase, really, after you buy your house. So you need to go into it with some care and thought. And you don't have to buy the first car that you see. You can look around, shop around. There are plenty of cars. There always will be. And you can get the car that's right for you. Ask questions if you don't understand.
Absolutely. There's nothing worse than being stuck with a vehicle that you change your mind later as to whether you really wanted to purchase it or not. And you can get into the dealership and you can get really taken away by the emotion of purchasing a vehicle, but really buying an asset, whether it be a house or a car or a boat or whatever it is, it's fundamentally a commercial decision. So you need to be going into it with a commercial mindset. Yes, cars are fantastic, and I more than anyone can vouch for that I get very excited about certain types of cars.
He does.
But even I have to really take a step back at times and go, do you know what, Henry, is this really a smart decision? Because it's very easy to get swept up when you go into a slick dealership and you talk to a very convincing salesperson whose career is to sell you things. And then not only do they get you on the purchase of the vehicle, they then encourage you to buy extended warranty packages and do their financing through them. And before you know it, you've signed up to all sorts of things that you may or not have really thought through properly. So really the best way to avoid buyer's remorse is to just make sure that you're going in fully prepared. You've done your homework before you've left home. You've worked out what it is that you want, and really it just comes down to can you reach an amicable negotiation with the dealership.
That's true. I know that for younger people, and everyone get off the road, my granddaughter now has her L's, and she's going to want to buy a car. Now, we often see young people not understanding and entering into contracts that they really don't understand. If you're young, I know it's really exciting and it's your first car, you've got your learners, you've just passed your test and you're on your P's, but you don't have to get the first car that you see, and take someone that understands cars. And if you don't have anybody, the RAA has a service to help you do just that, so that you get the car that's right for you and worth the money that you're paying. I find up here in the Adelaide Hills that the dealerships up here are actually pretty honourable, and you don't really have any problems. I know with Toyota, I bought my car sight unseen. Now, you might say that was a bit risky, Jen. You're a lawyer and you should know better, but my experience with this particular car dealership, even if they are my sponsors, and I'm not saying it because they're my sponsors, and everyone who knows me knows I don't just give kudos unless it's deserved, I stopped in after stopping at another car yard on the way back from court one day, and it was a very expensive car I was looking at, and the man wouldn't even talk to me. When I asked him about the car, all I got was, "Oh, well, you couldn't afford that." And then it was, "Well, okay, that may be, but can you tell me about the car?" "Oh, well, it's got a paint job." And I'm thinking, for 70 odd grand, it should have a good paint job. "It's got air conditioning," and I'm thinking, well, it should. And it's got an AM/FM radio and a CD player.
Oh, wireless.
I know. Wow. Oh, not to forget the Bluetooth. They'd had Bluetooth. Anyway, look, people, I might be a stereotypical girl and I don't understand about cars. That's a given. But I'm really not that stupid. So I said to him, "Okay, can you tell me about the engine? How many cylinders does it have? Because as you know, living up here, you need to get up and down the freeway easy. And also, I wanted to know the miles to the gallon or the kilometres to the litre." And he said, "Oh, well, you wouldn't understand." And I said, "I might not, but my husband will."
Well, that's a good point, Eugenia.
It's poor service.
Like any commercial transaction, if it doesn't feel right in your gut that the people you're transacting with are honest and honourable people, we're all relatively good reads of each other. If you don't get the right feeling from the person selling you the car, there's countless other options out there for you. So, like you say, Eugenia, there's absolutely no rush to have to buy a car there and there.
No, there isn't. And you know what? I left and he asked me for my card and I thought, I'm not giving it to you. Because once he found out I was a lawyer, he was very interested then. But I drove up here back to Mount Barker, stopped in at my sponsor, Adelaide Hills Toyota, went in and saw Tom and said, "Tom, I want a car, I want one within 10 minutes. Organise it for me, please." And he thought I was a bit pushy, but you know what? He got my car, I bought it sight unseen, and I've been very happy. That's the type of service we expect up here in the Adelaide Hills because we've always had it.
So that's dealing with brand new cars. But
That's right.
a lot of us, myself included, are not in the market for new cars, and we tend to look for second-hand cars. And really, there's two main options of buying a second-hand car. First, you can go to a dealership, and you've ordinarily got very similar protections as you would buying a new car in many cases.
That's true.
At least from main dealers like our station sponsor, and then there's some independent car yards that only deal in second-hand cars. What you have to be aware of there are that those dealers typically buy their cars through wholesalers and at auctions, so they can be getting cars from literally anywhere, dressing them up for sale and then putting them on their yards. So really, you've got to be very careful when you buy a second-hand car, either from a private party or from a dealership, that you get it inspected. Eugenia has suggested you could go to the RAA. That's very much the case. You could get a private mechanic to have a look at it. Really, you want to suss out what you're buying, whether it's through a dealership or whether it's through a private party, because at the end of the day, someone else has owned that car. And it could, in fact, be more than one person that's owned that car before you. Who knows what's happened to it? It may have been, at the bottom of the Gawler River at some point. It may have been wrapped around a tree previously. It may have, any number of things might have happened to that vehicle long before you came along. So you really want to be making sure that you do your due diligence. One thing I would strongly recommend anybody who's looking at buying a second-hand car do is get onto the Personal Properties Securities Register.
That's one of our questions.
The PPSR. For the cost of $2, go through the government website. Make sure you're using the government website. There's a few private parties out there. If you Google PPSR, they come up very high on Google, and they'll charge you anywhere between $30 and $50 to do the search. Don't do that. Make sure you're using the government website. Which I think is ppsr.gov.au. It's an Australian Commonwealth Government website. You can search the VIN number, the vehicle identification number of the vehicle you're considering purchasing. For $2, that report will tell you whether it's got any registered financial security interests, meaning does the person who's selling the car, do you actually owe money to the bank? So, in other words, they may be advertising a Holden SS SSV Redline Ute for $60,000, and you go, oh, you little ripper, that's a bargain, I'm going to buy that, and you go and purchase it, but what you don't realise is that they actually owe $75,000 to St George's, and that bank has got a security interest over that vehicle, and you've just paid money to someone who actually doesn't own the car, and then the bank will catch up with you and say, well, we want our car back, and you'll say, but I paid for it, and they'll say, well, too bad, so sad, and they'll take the car, and you'll be out of pocket the car and the money. Similarly, if it comes up as a stolen vehicle, if you end up purchasing a vehicle that's stolen, similar story, you've paid your money, the police come and find that the car's stolen, they recover the vehicle. Again, you're out of pocket for the cost of the vehicle and you're without a car. And I can tell you that I've got personal first-hand experience of a situation like that just recently, where a vehicle turned up at a wrecking yard that I sometimes use because I tinker with cars in my spare time, was a beautiful black Mercedes GL 500 SUV, and it didn't appear to have any damage on it. I said to the gentleman that works at the wrecking yard, what on earth's this car doing here? It's absolutely perfect. He said, oh, well, it was actually a recovered stolen vehicle. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, well, apparently this family dropped it in for a recall at the local Mercedes dealer, and the workshop technician realised that the VIN number had been tampered with and it was a stolen car. So they called the police. The police recovered the vehicle and confiscated it from the owner. So that owner, I don't know if you're listening, but they're probably out of pocket about $40,000 or $50,000, and now they don't have a car and they don't have their money. They're completely left high and dry, having done nothing wrong, having inadvertently purchased a stolen vehicle without realising. They're now completely out of pocket and without a vehicle. Okay. So for the sake of $2, the PPSR search is so important. It tells you if there's any registered financial interests over the vehicle, if the vehicle's ever been reported as stolen, and if the vehicle's ever been in an accident where the vehicle's been previously written off by an insurance company.
You must have ESP, Henry. I've got these questions here. How do I know if a car is registered? How do I know if a car is stolen? We've answered that. Can I check if the car is recorded as a write-off? And we can through the
Personal Properties Securities Register, PPSR.
And we can check, obviously, if the car's been defected as well?
If the car's been defected, that won't necessarily come up on the PPSR register, but that is something a dealer certainly can't sell a car that's defected. But the problem with private parties generally is that it really is more than anything buyer beware. Us lawyers have a little bit of those of us that are into our cars and have a bit of a joke where we say second-hand cars from private parties come with a 1-2 warranty, and people say, well, what's the 1-2 warranty? Well, it's once you pay, it's too late. Unfortunately, it really is a case of buyer beware. The private seller does not have any obligations to you under the consumer law. They don't have any obligations to you at all. They are just selling you a vehicle. In fact, the only recourse that you could potentially have would be if the vehicle was stolen and they were committing some sort of passing off stolen goods offence. But really, you have very, very little protection when buying a second-hand car from a private party. That's not to say that you shouldn't do it, but it is to say that you should go in completely eyes wide open and make sure that you have the car inspected by a mechanic, that you do your PPSR checks, and that you really, as I say to people, you're not only just inspecting the car, you're inspecting the person selling the car. If that person doesn't seem like an honourable person, if they don't measure up, if you notice that they've got 5 or 6 cars that are partially completed in their backyard, you've really got to work out for yourself. Does this transaction feel right?
That's correct. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go to a break, and we're going to be living on a prayer with Bon Jovi. And the reason we're going to do that is because when you're buying from a car from a private seller, you really are living on a prayer because you just don't know what you're going to get. But anyway, I like the song, so I hope you enjoy it. Go to something
If
else.
it doesn't work, Eugenia, I could always sing Living on a Prayer. I think I know most of the words.
No, I know them all. Okay. Matter with this CD. Now, if you're buying from a private seller, as we said, you really are taking a big chance. I've always thought if you're going to buy a used car, at least go to a car yard, a reputable car yard, and we're lucky in the Adelaide Hills and in South Australia anyway, because most car yards are reputable. But like everything in every job, you get the one or two that aren't particularly great, and there are problems. But generally, you're going to get protections, and that's really what you're paying for. You're getting peace of mind. You'll know that if you're buying from a dealership, new or used, that you'll know whether the car is registered or not. They'll register it for you because they can't give it to you to drive on the road unless it is. It's unlikely to have been stolen. If it's a write-off, you'll know because they have to tell you. And I haven't met a used car yard place yet where they're selling you write-offs without telling you. Maybe at auction, I suppose.
I don't know of any car dealership, Eugenia, that would touch a vehicle that's marked anything on the title for finance owing, stolen or written off. And certainly dealerships have a legal obligation to disclose that to any potential buyer. Typically what you'll find in practice is that dealerships, when they get vehicles like that, they'll either just refuse to take them on or they'll handball them straight over to a wholesaler.
That's right. So it's really important that you do your due diligence. Now, another question I had, because we've gone through the defects and everything, what do I need to know if I want to buy a car from interstate and bring it back to SA?
Okay, this is a really good question, Eugenia, and certainly people can get burnt buying cars interstate. When you purchase a car from interstate, you'll need to get it ID inspected in South Australia. So typically that means attending a facility known as Regency Park. When they go and inspect the vehicle, and you have to pay a nominal government fee for doing so, the main thing they're trying to work out is the car stolen or does it contain a stolen engine? So what they'll do is they will inspect the VIN number of the vehicle and they'll compare it against the engine number. So it's the serial number that's stamped into the actual engine. When you purchase a car from interstate, do not assume that the engine that's assigned to the vehicle at its birth is going to necessarily be the engine that's fitted to it at the day you bought the vehicle. Particularly a lot of European cars, it's often cheaper for people to just replace the entire engine than it is to perform complicated engine repairs. So what that can often mean is that they'll go into the second-hand market and buy an engine from a wrecked vehicle and replace the broken engine with an engine from a wrecked vehicle. But then what most people neglect to do is, even if that's not a stolen engine, it's all legitimate and they've got their mechanic to do it, they neglect to register the fact that they've changed the engine with the roads authority. So what that means is that when you bring the car into South Australia and they do the identification inspection, they're going to look at the engine number and they're going to go, hang on, this doesn't match the original number of the engine that the car came with, and then you will not be able to register the vehicle in South Australia. And also, when they're doing that inspection, even if the engine does match what's on record, if Regency Park happen to see anything else that's defectable on the car, you will have your car defected and you will have to rectify those issues before you can register the vehicle. One of the most common things they pick you up on is window tinting that's too dark. So if your tint is too dark for South Australia, which is 35% tinting on the front glass, as in the front side windows, and then I think we've got slightly more leniency for the back windows. But if you've purchased a vehicle from interstate with very, very dark window tinting that's darker than the legal limit, again, your car will be defected. You'll have to rectify the defect and then pay a fine for the lifting off that defect before you can register the car in South Australia.
Okay, so there are some things that you need to be aware of if you're buying interstate. It's time, it's money, and you're going to bring something back to South Australia that you might not even be allowed to register here. So take care and make sure that you're getting exactly what it is that you want that can be put on the road here in SA. Now, I have worked out what happened with this song.
Oh.
So we'll be going to it in about 23 seconds when the machine does its little whatever it is that it's doing. But one question that did come through was, you're at a car yard and some of them, well, all of them have a credit provider that they use. So a finance company to which they usually refer their customers. Can those credit providers be liable under the Australian consumer law for loss or damage that the buyer might suffer when the seller fails to meet consumer guarantees? What do you think? What's the answer to that?
I'm not really sure what the answer to that one is, Eugenia. It's but what I would say is that when someone does purchase a vehicle from a dealership, they should never feel as though they have to use the credit provider that the dealership offers up. Like anything in law, people should really do their homework, their due diligence before they get to the dealership and find a financial provider that they're comfortable with and don't necessarily feel the need to go with the one the dealership's offering. And interestingly, there have been some recent cases, and I believe there's a class action lawsuit that's ongoing at the moment about secret commissions that these finance companies have previously been taking from the dealerships without purchasers actually realising.
Exactly, and you can ask, are you getting a financial benefit? I think superannuation companies were having that kind of issue. Let's try for living on a prayer again, and fingers crossed it'll work this time. Talking Law with Eugenia, I'm your host Eugenia Matthews. Thank you for your questions. 0401 269 091. I don't bother giving my number out because you all know it anyway, but my guest today is Henry James of Henry James Legal. 0414 414 520. The program's brought to you by Adelaide Hills Toyota. We're discussing buying cars. And I don't know what happened because I was looking at the machine here. It said track 1, supposed to be living on a prayer, and it played track 2, keep the faith. Doesn't matter, I like that song anyway.
My offer to sing Living on a Prayer still stands, Eugenia.
God, no, I heard you singing in the break. You're worse than me. Not a good idea. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about that last topic, which was the finance people that the car yard is using.
Yeah, just to keep answering that question. The financial services provider has obligations to disclose various issues, but a failure of the financial service provider to disclose things is not something you can blame the dealership for. And similarly, if the dealership hasn't disclosed something, it's not something the finance company can be blamed for. They're two separate entities. The dealership should disclose to you if they have shall we say, a cordial relationship with the financial company that provides them a benefit. So,
a financial benefit.
A financial benefit. So if there's a commission that the dealership receives from the finance company, the dealership should disclose that to you. My personal advice on car finance is do your homework and just make sure that you're getting the best deal you can get for car finance. That the dealership, whilst it may be convenient to do your finance through the dealership, it's not always going to be the best deal. So like anything in law, just do your homework and make sure you're going into it with the eyes fully open. That probably answers that question, Eugenia.
Okay, and then we had a couple of questions, but you suggested this question anyway, which is mirroring what people are asking. I bought a car. To use the vernacular, it's stuffed. What can I do?
All right, well, that's probably a good question to raise, because it's probably what a lot of listeners that might be tuning in with interest might be thinking that they've experienced this or they are experiencing this. Ultimately, you've hopefully got a warranty because you purchased the vehicle for a reputable dealer, in which case the first port of call, if you have a warranty, would be to try and exercise your consumer rights through the vendor. Now, even if they haven't sold you a warranty plan on a second-hand car, if the vehicle is less than 15 years old or has done less than 200,000 kilometres, you have a statutory warranty under the consumer laws that you should be exercising. The first port of call is to try and get the seller of the vehicle, and by seller I mean if you're going through a dealership, to try and make good on what's wrong. But ultimately, if you don't get anywhere with that, then you may end up having no other option than to speak to a lawyer about going through the magistrate's court civil claims. Now, assuming that the debt's under $100,000. So if what's been caused is under $12,000 worth of damage, it's a minor civil claim. If it's more than $12,000 worth of damage and it's under $100,000, it's in the magistrate's court civil list. Now, if it's over $100,000 worth of damage, it's very likely that you've purchased something that's probably from a dealer with a warranty. But if it is over $100,000, you would be looking in the district and the Supreme Courts. Obviously, if you've purchased the vehicle from a private party, you're on your own. There is no recourse to take a private seller to court. If you've bought a car privately and it's turned out to be a complete duffer, that's entirely on you, and the courts will not side with you with trying to sue a private seller. It is absolutely buyer beware when you're buying from a private seller. But if you're buying from a dealership and they won't make good on their promises to you, or they've breached the consumer law because the car was supposedly covered under a statutory warranty, or in fact a warranty plan they've sold you, then you absolutely should speak to a lawyer about putting a claim against them in the magistrate's court. Well, most likely in the magistrate's court, because it's probably going to be under $100,000. But if it's in the minor civil list, so if it's under $12,000 worth of damage, it's a minor civil claim. And if it's over $12,000, it's a general civil claim. And effectively, what you'd be pleading would be breach of contract, breach of statutory warranties, and then you'd want to have quotes from your repairer saying that the car is defective and it's going to cost however much money to fix it. And then you've unfortunately going to have an argument in court.
So I guess what we're really talking about there, apart from the expense, so you need to be very careful when you're purchasing a car, because it is a big expense. Major failures in a car and minor failures. I take it the major failures would be the ones that cost thousands and thousands of dollars to fix.
Well, think of it this way, Eugenia. If you buy a car and the rear left electric window stops working, you're not going to get a refund for the whole car.
No.
But if you buy a car and the engine explodes, then absolutely you should be fully reimbursed for that.
Because that was happening. I remember the news a few years ago. There were cars and their engines were just catching alight. That would be a major
unquestionably. I mean, if it's not usable as a vehicle as a result of the mishap, then that's almost obviously a major failure. But if it's simply a wear and tear issue, or it's it's just par for the course of owning an older vehicle that it might have a minor electrical gremlin or whatnot, that's a minor failure. Now, there may well still be an obligation of the dealership to try and make that right, but it's not going to give cause to a full refund of the vehicle.
Right. But if you do have to take your car back to the dealership and get it fixed, then you have the right to expect that the car's going to be fixed with due care and skill, that any parts they use are going to be fit for the purpose, that your car's going to be fixed within a reasonable period of time. What about if someone gets their car fixed by their private mechanic instead of where they bought their car?
Well, that's a good point. It is a misconception in the community that the warranty is only valid if you go back to the dealership for your servicing. That is absolutely untrue. That would be against the law, in fact, and be considered uncompetitive, anti-competitive practice to insist that a person has to have their vehicle serviced by a particular entity in order to keep a warranty. A person has the right to have their vehicle serviced by whoever they wish to have it serviced by.
I have another question, and they say I have to use genuine Holden parts or genuine Toyota parts. Do they have to, or can they use a part that's fit for purpose?
Well, really, I would recommend that you read the warranty documentation on that. The warranty documentation may require that, but whether it's lawful or not, I guess the jury's out on that one. But having said that, if you are purchasing parts out there in the market to repair your vehicle, I can speak from personal experience that you do get what you pay for, and that sometimes it is not wise to just go out onto AliExpress and buy the cheap Chinese knockoff version, particularly if we're talking about a safety item. So if you're replacing, say, your brake pads or your brake rotors or something that's really safety critical, spend the money. Like don't be a tight ass.
Yep. So essentially, if an independent repairer fixes a car and doesn't do it properly, then the dealership's not going to be liable. The logbook and service manual. Now, you buy a new car, you get your logbook. What if you don't actually service your car because you're slack and then something happens to the car? No surprise there.
Well,
what happens?
It's probably on you because you have an obligation to maintain the vehicle, and really, there's an overarching legal doctrine called the mitigation of loss, which is if you're going to sue someone, and this is just generally speaking, if you're going to sue someone, you have to show the court that you've done everything you could to try and reduce the risk of what has happening. And the way that transpires into this situation is if you've gone to court to say, oh, my engine exploded, and the court look into it and they go, well, when did you last change the oil? And you say, oh, I haven't changed the oil for 50,000 kilometres. Then the court's going to go, well, what were you expecting?
Well, that's right. So it's like anything. You've got to service your car, and why wouldn't you? It's an expensive item that you're buying. So if the dealership owes you a duty of care and they've got to fix any issues that might arise, well, you also have to make sure that you look after your car, you drive it appropriately. So if it's a car that's for the road, you're not going to start racing with it.
Well, it's interesting that I read the other day, Eugenia, that given the cost of living pressures that we're all suffering, it seems to be that people are more and more likely to put off servicing their vehicle.
Yeah, and you mustn't do that.
What I would say about that is that a $300 oil change service looks mighty cheap when you consider that a new engine could be $20,000 or more in some cases. Suddenly changing the oil seems a lot cheaper than replacing the engine.
Exactly. And, if your car has some kind of defect, go back to the dealership, because you've got to give them an opportunity to fix your car. You can't just go anywhere. And using your next door neighbour because he used to be a mechanic and now he's retired and might do something in your backyard isn't going to give you protections at law should something go wrong.
Certainly not. And in fact, it's worse than that, Eugenia. If the car you say has gone wrong and you've not taken it back to the dealership, but you've taken it to old mate Bill from down the pub, it would be very easy for that dealership to say, well, that was old mate Bill that broke that.
That's right.
It breaks the sort of chain of evidence, as it were, as to where the fault has originated from. If as soon as you detect the fault, you take it to the dealership and you don't take it anywhere else, then they can't turn around and blame anyone else for it.
No. That's common sense, really.
Absolutely,
isn't it?
it's common sense. And as Eugenia says, give the dealership the opportunity to make it right, because some dealerships out there, like our sponsor, are really good people and will do the right thing. So you've got to at least give them the chance.
Now, I had a client who had bought a new vehicle from somewhere not in the Adelaide Hills, and his car really was a lemon. And he said to me, "Don't we have lemon laws in this country?"
Not like they do in the United States. In the United States, they have probably some of the best lemon laws in the world. We have the Australian consumer law that says that a product has to be of merchantable quality and fit for purpose. It also says that the vendor only has a number of opportunities to fix the vehicle, but if after giving them the opportunity to make the repairs, the issue's still not rectified, then they have to consider refunding you. Absolutely, you have those rights. The only problem that I'd say is that enforcing those rights can sometimes be very difficult, and it's in the enforcement of those rights where a lot of people get done over. So it's not simply a case that the dealership will necessarily do the right thing. Sometimes it does require you bringing an action in court, citing the Australian consumer law as part of your claim against that dealership. Just because the Australian consumer law says you've got certain rights and the dealership's got certain obligations, does not in any way mean that that dealership's going to automatically do the right thing. You may have to take them to court.
As happened in the case that I was involved with, that car really was, in my opinion, a lemon. And, he drove it, it would break down, they'd take it back. There's nothing wrong with the car. Well, there was. So I said to him, "No, don't you drive it back to the car. You get a tow truck and you tow it there. And then they can't say, well, you driving it caused extra damage," so that they can avoid their responsibilities to you on making sure that the car you bought is actually fit for purpose. He eventually got his money back and went to another dealership. I actually sent him to my sponsor, actually, and he was very happy. Everyone I've sent there has been very happy. It's a good place to do business,
But
frankly.
I think the takeaway message there, Eugenia, hidden in all of that, is that he had to engage your services in order to get an outcome.
That's right.
Which is, I think, and this is, as Miles would say, a soapbox moment for me. I think a bit of a failing of the current law that it does require that Eugenia and I, are in a job when it comes to people being burnt by car dealerships. And in a perfect world, Eugenia and I wouldn't be able to get any work out of this type of thing, but unfortunately I get inquiries about people that have bought bad cars all the time.
And for me, it's a contract law issue, and we look at that from a contract law perspective. I might not know about cars, but I know about contract. Look, take your time. You don't have to buy the first car you see. Test drive the car. Make sure it's the car that's right for you. If you're going to go on a finance agreement, understand the contract. If there's a kickback, you have the right to know. When I refer people that ring me to Henry, for example, for wills, which I don't do, I always say,